So, oh, and I should have changed the day, month, and XXX. Apologies for that. Again, my name is Manisha. I'm the Director of Health Professions Advising. Today, um, for our App Prep series, we're going to be talking about preparing for your interview. As I mentioned, while many health professional fields are still doing virtual interviews, some have started going back in person, and then some schools do offer the optional of both. So maybe that's something we can chat about is, when do you decide to do an in-person versus keeping the virtual option? When we think about interviewing, just like the rest of your application, we always want to think about a competency-based application. Um, what this means is, as you're answering the question, you want to think about the core competencies. Now, this is from AAMC Core Competencies. While it is directed to medicine, I think all health fields benefit from being able to speak about the skills and competencies they've developed with these words. Going into any field as a health professional, it's important to know how you've built these and what value by building these skills and abilities do you add to the field of medicine. So, I suggest reflecting on your level of mastery on each. I don't think you have to know everything 100% well, but it's a good idea to be able to speak to how you've developed this and how you continue to engage in activities where you are building these skills. And the ones that you might have less experiences, thinking of examples, how are you going to continue working on them to strengthen yourself as a person and a future health professional? So this is always exciting. I got the interview, right? It's exciting. This is what everything you've done up to now, you've worked towards. So then what happens? What do you do next? And that's what we're going to talk about from, presentation to how your body language is interpreted, what to do if there's a challenge, whether it's in person or virtual, and then thinking about questions to ask your interviewers. um, an interview should be a dialogue, not a monologue. It shouldn't just be you answering questions. It should be interactive and back and forth. Those make the most engaging and interesting interviews. In fact, when your interviewer engages with you and speaks more, it's actually a good sign that they have, confidence in you, they like you, and they're now contributing to the conversation. So why do we interview? That's an important question, right? By the time you get to the interview, your schools have read your personal statement, your experience section. For those applying to allopathic medicine, you're meaningful. They've read so much about you, your secondaries or supplements, so they know a lot. But even with that, it's still a flat profile. They've gotten to know you on paper, and the application's only going to say so much. They're wanting to get a sense of your non-academic factors. So evaluating your personality, how you present yourself, your maturity, your self-awareness of how you've come to that seat, that virtual seat or that in-person seat at the time. um, how do you communicate? How have you, what is your recognition of your personal strengths, um, weaknesses, or areas of development? How have you addressed ethical situations you've been involved in? And who you are and how you fit with their school. What value are you going to bring to their school? Why do they give you the seat? I would also encourage you to think about it's a courtship at that point. You like them, they like you. So what you're trying to do is find that middle ground where you add value to them, but they're also aware of what value they as a school offer to you. So let's talk about what your interview day might look like, some basics. Whether it's in person or virtual, you can expect one or multiple interviews. These can be as short as, 15, 20-minute interviews. These can be as long as hour-long interviews with whoever's interviewing you. Multiple mini interviews is a completely different piece, but I'll touch upon that. You might be interviewed by a faculty member or a current student or both. It's rarely admissions person. It's usually a faculty and a student. Now, there might be different formats. So the one-on-one is what we're most familiar with, where you are sitting across from someone and having a conversation. Panel or small group, panel meaning you are being interviewed by a group of people, or a small group, you are part of a group of candidates being interviewed either by an individual or a panel. And then multiple mini interviews. Many health professional schools have picked this up outside of medicine. This is where you go through just what it says, many small interviews that range 6 to 10 minutes in length. And you're just kind of going either physical room to physical room or virtual room to virtual room. And then a pre-recorded interview. Some schools use this as a screening. Some schools use this as their interview, where they have set questions. You're asked, you record your responses, and then you wait. And then another kind of in general to know that's important, open versus a blind interview. Open meaning the interviewer has had an opportunity to review your application, usually your personal statement, and maybe your secondary responses. Blind meaning they know nothing about you other than that you were granted an interview. I'm going to pause there before moving on. Anything I can answer thus far? And again, you're welcome to either unmute or put it in chat. Either way, anything I can answer. All right, I will keep going. Okay, so when you think about, and also, is the top covered? How about that? Okay, so when you think about interviewing, preparation is key. How you prepare yourself is really important to you being successful. So by the time you've gotten an interview, it could be anywhere from 2 to 8 months since you've actually completed and submitted your application. That's a long time. Thinking about allopathic or osteopathic medicine, interviews can start in September of the year you apply, and they can continue through April or May. So, do you think you'll remember everything you wrote? Well, I'll answer. Probably not. So, it's a good time to review everything you've written in your primary, everything you've written in your secondary, and then think about how you would respond to questions. Like, we'll talk about general buckets of questions I would have you prepare for, but you want to be ready for anything from academic background, your major, if you had any dips in your grades, maybe you did a study abroad, anything about your academics that might stand up in a positive or not positive way. Extracurricular activities and hobbies. Why did you choose to do what you did? Why was it valuable to you? What did you get out of those experiences? Same thing with employment and research experiences. Why did you choose that? Even a job like barista has value. Maybe you didn't choose to do that, but you still, we think about those core competencies, you're still walking away with skills from it. So I'm going to back up to that slide for a second. Anybody work in food service, customer service, or retail? Nope. Okay, quiet group. Even with that, I want you to think about it. So maybe I worked in retail. When we think about these competencies, what have I had the opportunity to build in myself? When we look at these competencies in front of us. I'll give you a hint. One of them could be service orientation, reliability, dependability, oral communication, empathy and compassion, interpersonal skills, teamwork and collaboration. Right there in a job where you might think, what does that have to do with going into health professional and into a health profession? So going back to when you think about, here's a job that I had, how do I speak about it? That's where that competency-based approach is important. Think about what you gained from those experiences. And then also they might ask you, why medicine? Why dentistry? You have drafted a version of that into your personal statement, but you want to have this 3 to 5 minute response where you are sharing verbally why healthcare, why the particular field you're thinking of going into. And then be prepared for follow-up questions, right? They might ask you, can you elaborate on that? Can you tell me more? Maybe because it's very interesting. Maybe it's because they want more clarity. So be prepared for that. And as I mentioned, know everything in your application. Brush up on what you know to avoid being unsure. Don't assume you're going to remember it. Make sure you're taking the time to review it. An example, I had a candidate many, many years ago who did research for about 2 years while they were in college. Their second and third year. They took they took a couple of years before they applied. Actually, they did research for 3 years, but it was a break between when they graduated and when they applied. When they were applying, their interviewer, didn't know it, but happened to be very interested in that field and was asking some questions about protocols. Now, that person panicked because it'd been a while. They were out of school, they were no longer part of the research, and they stumbled and started saying like, I don't remember that. How do you think that interview went? For both the person and overall, what do you think happened? Yeah. As the person being interviewed, how do you think they felt? Very, very sad. And they weren't making the best impression. Now, could they have anticipated they were going to be asked detailed questions? Yes, they wrote about it. They spent 3 years doing it. And to the detail of what this person was asking, maybe not, but being able to say, gosh, when I was in this lab, we were focused on and I really enjoyed, but they kind of stumbled and stuttered, and that just made them uncomfortable. Now they're in a bad headspace. So that's what you're trying to avoid. I don't know, in an interview is probably not the best answer we want to give. We want to focus on, yes, let me tell you about this experience. Let me tell you why it was important to me. Let me tell you what I walked away from, a challenging time. So those are things that you want to think about. And like I said, it could be 2 months, 8 months from the time you last saw your application. So when you get the interview, take a moment, review everything, jot down notes, think about, we'll talk about some common questions, but how do you prepare for some buckets of these questions? All right. Now, do your research again, but at the time you pick the school, you might have jotted down, if you were working with us at HPA, we were going to say, make a spreadsheet, write down 3 to 4 reasons why you're picking a school. Keep the spreadsheet updated. Now you got the interview, do your homework again. Consider what those 3 or 4 things are. Go over the school's website. The more you know, the more confidently you can speak to why the school's a good fit for you and what value you bring. In addition, there's the Reddits and whatnot out there, Student Doctor Network, and I will tell you to take everything written there with a grain of salt. We don't know who's writing it. A lot of times it's verbal vomit. So we want to be very cautious of what we read into it. But a good tool in there is to kind of go in with laser focus, as how people describe their interview day, and then back right back out. But there's no need to sit on sites that are just going to make you more anxious. But some of that could be, what do they commonly ask? If a school is very, focused on advancing medicine or ethical issues, so what's been going on in the last year in healthcare in your particular field? Read the news. Think of some reputable sites and kind of glance what's been going on. What are people talking about? So that you can add to the conversation. You might be asked your opinion on something. If you're asked your opinion on something, I expect you to give your opinion on something, but also still give us a range of what you know about the situation. The admissions committee is well aware you applied to multiple schools. If you're applying to medicine, that's about 25 to 30 schools that you're applying to. So they want to know why them. And you want to think about, as you're building that, what that might be. For example, if in your secondaries a school asks about, medical schools, very rigorous, you're not going to have a lot of time. We want to make sure our, future students know how to take care of themselves. So what do you do when you're stressed? And you write about how you're an outdoors person, you hike, you canoe, you do all of that. But the school you've applied to is in the cement jungle. It's a downtown somewhere. Something as small as that's going to make a school pause and wonder, like, how are we a good fit for you? If you're saying the best way you handle your headspace is to be in nature and we are nowhere near nature, that's going to be curious, right? So when you're building, look for things that make the most sense of why this school. Now, in any interview, you're going to have opportunities to ask questions. Aside from MMIs, that's a different conversation again. So you want to think of what's important to ask, right? Not something you can clearly pull from the website, clearly get answered from the website. You want to think about what more can you learn? So if you were researching the school, going through their blog and their current news, and something came up, ask about that, right? That shows you are interested, that shows you paid attention. If you are being interviewed by a medical or dental student, what would you want to ask them? Right? Think of things that they can answer that someone couldn't. That could be about daily life, or where do they do their rotations? How is being in that environment what they thought of? Where did they come from before? How did they adjust? So in thinking about who's interviewing you, what can you ask that demonstrates I am interested and it's not something I could easily find? I'm going to pause again. Any questions? All right. So we've been talking about types of questions, and there can be many, many different types. We can talk, and here's where we'll talk a little bit about the buckets and what to prepare for. But some questions can be open-ended. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your non-academic interests. Why medicine? Why dentistry? So you want to have some structure to it. Something could be about self-awareness. When did you have a difficult conversation? How did you handle a failure? Dedication to the profession. What do you think makes a good dentist? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Current issues, personal challenges, and struggle. So I generally think of when you're preparing for interviews, and a question can be asked multiple ways. So you really want to take a moment and listen to what's being asked. A common struggle interviewees have is they have something they want to say, they have a comment they want to make, but it doesn't quite fit the question. But they're so intent on getting this comment out. It's like putting a square peg into a circle. I understand that's something you want to say, but if it doesn't fit the question that's being asked, what's the problem with that? Tell me, why is that not a good thing? You're right. You aren't answering the question, which means you're not paying attention, which means you aren't engaging and you lack awareness. All of those things are revealed. So, as much as you have a burning desire to answer something you've prepared, you want to answer what's being asked, but adapt it, right? So, kind of big buckets to think about. Like, I would be prepared for tell me about yourself and tell me why this field. Tell me about yourself is very different from answering why medicine or why dentistry. Tell me about yourself has nothing to do with that. Why this field? Yes. Why this school? Yes. But that has nothing to do with tell me about yourself. So again, think about what you're being asked. I would be prepared to, another bucket to think about is challenge, a personal challenge, academic challenge, or professional challenge. Um, it's not about what happened, it's how did you handle it, right? What did you learn from it? So it's not so much the what, it's what got out of it. And responses like, I was disappointed, I was frustrated, is completely reasonable. And I expect that. No one is going to have a failure and be like, and that was fine, I moved on and I did better next time. Reveal those emotions. They talk about that self-awareness. Like, it was very disappointing. I worked so hard, and for it not to happen was a struggle. And I took a minute. I took a minute, and then I came back, and I tried to figure out where, I went wrong, and I worked harder on it. So that's a bucket. Strengths, accomplishments, as much as that are things that you're trying to develop, are also things that there should be things you're proud of, things that you've accomplished that you're very proud of. If you've had, in thinking about your major experiences, what are a couple of things you would say? When have you had difficult conversations with someone, whether it's a team member, a classmate, a customer, a lab member? All of these are important because as a health professional, you're going to have difficult conversations. You know, the reason why they might want to know about a failure or a challenge is they don't want professional school to be the first time you didn't get something. That's actually a secondary question in many schools. Tell us about a time you didn't get something you thought you deserved. They want to know you've experienced disappointment and you've recovered from it and you tried again, or you adapted and tried something different. So these are some kind of general buckets you want to be prepared for, and depending on what's asked, adjust your response accordingly. In terms of interviewing, it's not so much about thinking of things on the spot. You should have some ideas. It's like kind of accessing the information, just like your application, and being able to adjust it, adapt it to what they're asking, and then speak about it. You can easily Google sample dental school interview questions, medical school interview questions, and you're going to get hundreds and hundreds. And that's why I sort of go with the buckets, right? Thinking of 2 to 3 examples for like these broad buckets, and then being able to pull those examples in based on what you're being asked. All right, let's talk about presentation. You're going to be potentially nervous, and that's okay. Every time I've gone into an interview, I actually acknowledge that big pink elephant in the room, and that makes me feel better because it would be a lie to say I wasn't. So if, how are you doing? How's everything going? Thanks for asking. I am nervous, but I am so excited to be here, and share what value I think I can add to your team. For me, that's powerful. Putting it out there so I'm not hiding behind it anymore and it's no longer got power over me. So find what works for you. You want to be confident, but there's a difference between confident and letting your ego get the best of you. So as you're preparing, we don't want to go down a deep dark hole, but we want to talk about how do we reinforce this positivity. Managing anxiety, again, I mentioned it's okay to be nervous. It's when you can't get past it that's problematic. So, what do you need to do? Do you meditate? Do you run? Do you get a pep talk from a family member or a friend? Do you isolate and sort of focus? That's me. I do not want to talk to anyone. I don't like pep talks. I want to isolate, sit in a bubble, and then kind of perk up. I feel like the Energizer Bunny, right? I like shut down and then perk up, and then I'm on. I've practiced that. I found what works for me. Professionalism. Depending on where you're interviewing, who you're interviewing, slang is not universal. Slang is different generationally, culturally, and regionally. So try to speak in common language. I fully admit I'm a little bit older than my peer advisors, and they will say things sometimes. And then I go and I'm like, please explain, or I have to go Google it. Um, because we speak a different slang. I'll say the slang I grew up with. They may not understand it unless they've heard their parents speak it. So keep that in mind. Filler words. Are you an ummer, an let's try to minimize that. I practice very hard to not but simply take a pause and then keep talking, right? It's better you take a moment before answering, think about it, and then calmly, clearly, and confidently answer the question. I'd rather you pause than fill it in with these fillers like or or ers. I just did that. I would rather you practice this and enunciate. Anybody in the room have been told they're super fast talkers or super slow talkers? I know that I am a super fast talker. What you're hearing is years of me practicing to slow it down professionally. Now, I'm with my friends or family, we're back to 100 miles an hour and 4 different stories and interweaving everything. But I encourage you, speak no faster than you can say the word enunciate or pronunciate, and make sure you're hitting all the syllables. Okay, Connor, thanks for sharing. So if you talk too quietly, let's talk about how you practice that. Open chest, sit upright. You don't have to be uncomfortable. Like I am not one to sit, stick straight. I actually lean into the chair, but open up your chest and practice projecting in a room. We don't want the interviewer to have to lean forward either on Zoom or in person to get to you. So go into a room, a larger room, a smaller room, and practice. Sit with a friend or a family member that you trust and practice projecting. If, again, we don't want to have the other person lean in. Yes, talking too fast when you're nervous or excited, that's normal. So big breath and slow it down. So think about counting a little bit to slow your thoughts, to handle that nervousness so that you are speaking again, not super fast so they can't understand what you're saying and you're just trying to get all your answer out because you memorized it and you're just trying to get everything forward. Did you hear any of that or understand anything I said? If you were interviewing me, how would you feel? You would feel like I just machine gunned an answer at you. So, what can you do to slow it down? You practice. There is no shortcut to practicing. Y'all have Zoom, y'all have smartphones potentially. Okay, I'm not going to assume. Record yourself, play it back, listen to yourself, listen to how you're speaking. Again, this is years of me slowing down my words. Many years. My brother, on the other hand, speaks like so thoughtfully. Ordering at a restaurant kills me. So when I was helping him practice for interviews, we had to speed it up because I'm like, everyone's going to fall asleep if you talk like that. So know yourself. And then if you do get nervous, it's okay to pause. Take a big breath, let it out, and keep going. Other things that you can do, if there's something that makes you feel calm, like if you have, don't laugh at this, but I have known and I have had a rock that I wrote something that was very meaningful to me. And I just sort of kept it in my hand or on my lap, in my pocket. And that was a way for me to center and ground myself, an object. So knowing that, I used that tactile sensation to ground myself, to calm myself. So again, think of what works for you. I worked with a student once who was very all over the place during interviews. And we talked about what they did to calm themselves. And they were like, I'm a long distance runner. So my next question was, what do you do to calm yourself? I need to do at least 3 to 4 miles, maybe 5, and I'm better. So before interviews, they'd wake up earlier, they'd run their 5 miles, shower, and their body was calm. Their energy was calmer. So do what's right for you. Other things, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know if the person who greets you on Zoom or at a front desk, you don't know who they are and what say they have to your interview. The assumption is everybody is going to comment about you at some point. When I interview, I will ask my entire team, what did you think of the candidate? I get everyone's opinion, whether it was the peer advisor at the front desk or it was someone actually in the interview or it was during the meet and greet. Eye contact and facial expressions. I am a very emotive person. Everything shows, but I go from emotive to very fast. And so my colleagues always telling me, fix your face. So I have to practice smiling with my eyes and lips because I have been told I can smile with my lips, but my eyes, not so much. They can still tell I'm annoyed. So I have to practice that. Mirror, record yourself. If you are on Zoom, okay, I meant to have the opposite screen show so I could show you, but if you look, you've got my upper torso in the camera. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, you have that floating head. Don't be a floating head. That's not helpful. So about midway to your torso, my I'm not on my laptop right now. I'm on a separate camera, but if I were on my laptop's actually on a riser, so the camera hole is eye to eye to me. That looks like you're looking at someone in the eye. So you want to practice that. Hand gestures. I used to be a hand talker. I have learned to keep my one hand on my lap. You don't have to avoid all hand talking, but one hand on my lap to keep from fidgeting, to keep from flailing. I've done an interview where I had someone do this unaware for 45 minutes. It was killing me. So again, clear your space. Don't put anything there that's going to give you the fidgets. If you live in the Apple universe, think about how many things ding at the same time. So you want to start shutting things down. Body posture, you don't have to be like this. I actually kind of sit at an angle. I'm comfortable. I'm making eye contact with the camera or in person. I'm very careful about my fidgeting, but I'm still using my hands sparingly. So you want to practice. Interviewing is a skill. It's a skill you need to build. All right, let's talk about content. So when you are asked questions, behavioral questions, right, where they're asking about past experiences and how that predicts future uh, actions, there are many acronyms out there: STAR, PAR, CAR. I particularly use PARC. So in thinking about a behavioral question, tell me about a time when. You want to go with, briefly state the problem. What's going on? Then, what did you do? If you were part of a team, acknowledge the team, and then the focus should be back on I, me, my, you, right? Results. Based on this happened. It could be a positive result, it can be a negative result, depending on what they're asking you. And then knowledge gained. What did I learn because of what happened? If it makes sense for the type of question, you can do parka, another A, application to the future. What might you do different? We've touched upon this, but again, make sure you're answering the question that was asked, nothing more. And thinking about those competencies, reveal who you are, those qualities, those strengths, your maturity and readiness. Again, nothing short of practice. So do mock interviews with people you know, with mentors. We can help you. You can come to our drop-in appointments, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, 15 minutes, practice a couple questions, and then leave. You can schedule a 30-minute appointment. And then we have those, like I mentioned, we'll have a mock MMI session September-ish. Again, later in fall, maybe like October, November-ish, for you to continue practicing. But the more you practice, the more confident you will be, and any quirks that you might have will be revealed and give you time to work on them. And then lastly, schedule details, right? Whether it's in person or virtual, know the schedule. If it's on Zoom, your interview may be one morning, one afternoon, the next afternoon. It might be scattered over multiple days. So arrive, to the whatever format they're using. If it's in person, consider transportation. How are you getting there? Are you staying overnight? How are you getting from the hotel to the interview spot? What's happening with your luggage? Communicate with the school. Again, for the pre-dent in here, if you are in person, consider all those things of travel before feeding yourself. What's on your body? What are you carrying? Where does that all go? Regardless of Zoom or phone, dress professionally and groom meticulously. I know I am personally guilty of only half dressing my body. In fact, I'm wearing sweatpants. In an interview, we want to have the entire attire we are interviewing in for multiple reasons. One, wearing your professional outfit puts you in a headspace of readiness, right? It's like putting on armor. You're changing your mindset. You're putting on that hat for the moment. Second, maybe you stand up and reach for something and your bottom half doesn't match your top half. That's not okay. What was it? A medical school was telling us they were interviewing a candidate. Everything was going well, and she asked for something, and she's like, "Oh, let me go get my wallet." I think she had to give, just kind of pull up a photo. She stood up, leaned over, and The interviewer said, the admissions rep said, I wasn't sure if there was anything being worn on the bottom half of her body. That's not okay. Another interviewer has shared, I have a pretty clean background. If my camera doesn't zoom out, you actually don't see much. I know what the lighting in my room is morning, afternoon, and evening. I know when to close my drapes because the sun's going to glare. I know when to turn on the overhead lights. I know my space very well. But an interviewer was sharing, again, they were interviewing someone, and there was a pot plant in the background. It's legal in some states. I don't know if I would bring that to an interview on Zoom. So again, consider your background, right? It doesn't have to be completely blank, but minimize, right? Minimize distractions. Dress conservatively and classy, whether it's in person or Zoom. Now, it doesn't mean you have to put on the, you don't have to go buy the most expensive suit out there. You need to buy an outfit that's comfortable and fits you well. When was the last time you dressed up for something? Might have been a while. Make sure your outfit still fits. When I was interviewing for HPA back in 2018, 3 years post children, I had many suits from my former job where I was at a private school and had many nice outfits. My post maternity body was not my pre maternity body. I was at Macy's 2 days before my interview trying on clothes because I made that mistake. I knew about this interview for a month. You don't want to be that person. And I am petite, which means I'm very short, which means everything has to be adjusted. And this was an in person interview. I just had a very long outfit on because that's the best I could do. Oopsie. Let me go back to that. Body language, right? My very first interview out of college, I was a jiggler. Not because of anything, just I wiggled, I shook my chair. That's who I was. And the interviewer stopped in the middle of the interview and was like, are you okay? Are you cold? I'm like, no, I'm fine. Not recognizing my body was being crazy. So other things to keep in mind. Good question. Is a green screen good? That's up to you. I just use a wall, right? So it's very common when you have a desk, you back your desk into the wall, and so your back is to the room. I don't need you to see what's going on in my room right now. So I actually pushed my desk out a few feet, and my chair is now against the wall with me facing into the room. So this is as neutral as you get. If you use a screen, on Zoom, that's fine. Just be sure what happens when you move around, because you know how you can go in and out and it's hard to tell what's going on. So again, neutral, but try what you're going to the space, check the lighting if it's virtual. If you're in person, again, check your outfit. It just has to fit and fit well. Treat everyone with respect. Silence everything, because if something dings, for me, my iPad, my phone, my computer, everything will start dinging. So my watch, right? Turn everything off that you don't need. And then lastly, you got the interview. What does that mean? What's the most important thing I want you to walk out of with today is they liked what you wrote. They want to get to know you more. So that is a positive. You're already partially there. You're already halfway there. So go with that. That's the end of the presentation. I'm going to turn off the recording. I can hang out and answer some questions for a bit, but let me turn off the recording first.